I'm live. Hi. Oh, got the border right there. Hi. Today is day 224 of my own personal queer quarantine. I'm Sweet Gwendolyn, and today is November 2nd, 2020, which means tomorrow is November 3rd, which is election day. And so the last time I checked in with you guys in this format, it was day 33 of my own personal queer quarantine. And I just was not able to keep up the pace. I was trying to crank those out, but just like so much kept happening all the time. It just was exhausting, and I had a lot going on too. So I took a break, but it's very possible that our country is careening into civil war, pending on how this election plays out. And it is almost definitely going to be extremely messy no matter what. So as I used to always qualify these videos when I was making them in the first month, I'm primarily making these for me to watch many years later as I want to look back and kind of see how it all played out. Maybe, lend them to my next door neighbor's kid for some book report on the Great Quarantine Civil War. Hopefully not Civil War. But yeah, I don't know. I just feel like as much as certainly much of 2020 has been very historically significant, it's very obvious that what's happening right now is about to be a really, really, really big deal. So I prepared some notes. Pardon me for a moment while I pull them up. There they are. Okay, so essentially what I'm going to be doing is I'm not even going to try to cover everything that has happened since day 33 and now on day 224. It's been a lot. I'm going to try and just hit on some of the key notes heading towards the election tomorrow, and I'm going to keep making these videos. So no disrespect for any topic I do not go in depth for. This is just more of the recap, which is not going to be necessarily a quickie recap. I'm going to try and keep it moving as much as possible, though. So yeah, in future episodes of this, we'll probably go more in depth on a number of these subjects. But right now, I'm just trying to, get it all out there leading up to election day tomorrow. So, yeah, a lot's happened, but where we left off, what I would always do is I would put the numbers for national, state, and local infections and deaths. So where we left off on day 33 was that in the US, there were 756,000 infections and 47,000 deaths. Today on day 244, we have 9,554,000 total infected and 237,000 total dead. And obviously those numbers are going up substantially every day, probably even more substantially in the near future, because there is a really big, they're calling it a third wave. In many respects, we're still sort of on the first one, but we did at least get things to go down a little. But yeah, it's just, I think we had like the worst date for the pandemic in the country as far as infection rates within the last few days. So it's very bad. In Texas, last time we checked in on day 33, there were 22,000 infected, 574 dead. That has skyrocketed to 100,000 total infected and 18,600 total dead. And on day 33 in Travis County, we had a total of 1,263 infections and 28 dead, and that has tragically risen to 32,452. 32,000 infected, 452 dead. But yeah, to kind of catch us up to how we got to right now, in short, a lot of people, mostly Republicans, handle things very, 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 very badly. That kind of came from the top down with Trump. Essentially, he kind of, for whatever reason, he turned this pandemic into like a political thing. Wearing masks seems to be the single most effective thing we could do to stop the spread of the disease. So he naturally jumped on the anti-mask bandwagon, and people have the personal freedom not to wear masks. And he was also trying to artificially force businesses back open, which, I mean, I agree with to a certain extent. People need to have livelihoods, or I just feel like they shouldn't have shut anything down without giving people checks to stay at home if they're not going to be able to get their paycheck. But anyway, he was just trying to artificially just shove everyone back out there with no masks, no precautions, no nothing. Same with trying to force the schools back open. They did ultimately, they kind of shut out for the rest of the school year. Back in March, they switched to online learning. Now in September, it's sort of a scattered throughout the country as if it's in person or online. And in Travis County, it's online though. Travis County being where Austin is, where I live. Anyway, Trump did everything as poorly as it could possibly be handled, which is why the USA #1 in the world for COVID deaths, unfortunately. Brazil, who is the other country that handled it almost as badly as we did, is not very far behind. Anyway, the only good news in all this is that at least people have been very upset about it, and it's hurting Trump at the polls. And as of yesterday, most national polls had Trump 10 points behind Biden. However, it's still possible for him to win, and a lot of focus is on Pennsylvania. So we'll see what happens. I mean, there's a number of states. Actually, Texas is a toss-up state, and that is incredibly exciting because apparently Texas has not gone Democratic for president since Carter back in '76. So anyway, just like other epilogues to things I was covering at the time, everyone got exactly one stimulus check, which was $1,200. They, for a couple of months, were giving an extra $600 in unemployment benefits, but then they got rid of those because they said it was a disincentive for people to go back to work. And a lot of people's unemployment benefits have just run out altogether because they aren't extending those. But despite the fact that the Senate was unwilling to help get a COVID relief bill out there for businesses or individuals, they still managed to force through the Supreme Court nomination of Amy Barrett, which was cheating, essentially, since they wouldn't let Merrick Garland on the court. So that's going over very badly, and that has also gotten a lot of people very fired up. I mean, they just swore in a few days ago, so it's right before the election when they wouldn't let Merrick Garland be voted on by Obama's nominee. Like, I think it was in February. Oh, because it's an election year. So, I mean, it was just a power grab. And oh yeah, by the way, I'm having to touch up my headphones. They're slipping a little because I don't have them all the way up in my head because I want people to be able to see this bang up job I did on my hair dye. I did that. It's leopard print, or it's supposed to be. I think it turned out all right. Blue is starting to fade a smidge. I'll touch it back up in a few days. But yeah, I guess that's one of the benefits of quarantine, is being able to take your hair into your own hands and try a few experiments. Let's just say the last experiment didn't work out quite as well. It was all right. I had black stars on a yellow background, but that is another story. So another thing that's a major factor leading up to the election is that we are just having record fires in California and Colorado. Like it's their worst fires on record. And we're also having record hurricanes. We went through all the letters of the alphabet, and we just had Hurricane Zeta, which of course hit New Orleans again. It's like the third time in almost a month that they've been hit. There's actually another hurricane coming. I forget my Greek alphabet, but yeah, they ran out of the Roman alphabet, so they're on the Greek alphabet now. So a lot of people are very conscious of climate change, and Trump is anti climate change prevention, I guess, because it's bad for business. He's also, by the way, I don't have time to go into it, but just like a delusional liar. And I feel like people were kind of into it for a while because it was entertaining, but then shit got real with this pandemic, and suddenly it wasn't as entertaining to have a science denier getting more than 250,000 people killed, with it rapidly rising. Although I will say the deaths have slowed a little bit, not because the infection rate is slowing, but we've gotten better at treating people. Remdesivir apparently was fairly helpful. I don't know I think that's the only approved treatment, but there's a few other experimental ones. They're still working on getting a vaccine, which best guesses are it won't be ready before February, but even then there will be obvious distribution issues, and also just the fact that a lot of people think that it's Bill Gates trying to put a barcode on them or something, that like they're not already putting everything on Facebook. So anyway, all right, so we have made it through those headlines. So then that's just, all right, so those are factors, and believe me, there's a lot more. There's probably we'll get to the protests and riots and demonstrations and everything in a minute. That's sort of like its own subject. But other stuff, so just election specific stuff. So they had the first presidential debate, and basically that was just Trump talking over Biden and the moderator the entire time, and he came off very badly. That really hurt him in the polls. Then they did not have a second debate because Trump finally got COVID. Like, what took so long? I mean, he was refusing to wear a mask. He was interacting with everyone. But yeah, he had I guess it was some sort of ceremony for Amy Barrett in the Rose Garden, where he was like introducing her to all the Republican elites to get them to back her nomination in the Senate. And no one was wearing a mask, and everyone was like hugging and mingling and packed all together. It turned out to be like a minor super spreader event. Oh yeah, Chris Christie got it and was in the ICU for 5 or 6 days. And previously, Herman Cain contracted it at a Trump rally and died. So, and yeah, Trump has continued to do all these super spreader major rallies. Like, just people, God, I saw a number earlier today. Like, I didn't read the article, so I don't know if it's just but it's really believable that his rallies had been, traced to 33,000 infections and several hundred deaths. I mean, I don't see why not. I did not get a chance to go in depth to see how reputable their sources were on that. But yeah, I mean, it's playing really badly, and he keeps making fun of Joe Biden for wearing a mask. He even got COVID. Trump did. And so he went to Walter Reed Hospital, got deluxe treatment. You know, he was helicoptered in. He was apparently really sick and was on oxygen, but it was pretty brief because he got, world-class medical attention that most people can't get. And he was apparently given, what's it called? Regeneron, which is apparently made out of fetal cells, but the pro-life crowd has not been bothered by that, because in the big picture, it's worth it so he can save other babies. And plus, he's not responsible for the actual abortions that went into that. So, whatever. He got better, and he went right back on the campaign trail while he was still infectious. In fact, he even made his Secret Service agents drive him around the hospital so he could wave at all of his fans, because he had like all these supporters outside the hospital the whole time. And so, yeah, he like possibly exposed, well, definitely exposed, potentially gave COVID to his Secret Service agents. And so, yeah, they had separate town halls on different channels between Biden and Trump. So people flipped back and forth between the two. I didn't, though. I don't like either of them. I'm voting for Biden, though. But just because he's who I'd rather spend the next 4 years protesting and not Trump. And he might actually do some good, to be determined. But let's see, checking my notes. Oh, yeah, then let's not forget the vice presidential debate, which was, of course, between Kamala Harris and Mike Pence, which mainly is just noteworthy because a fly landed on his hair, which is white. So it really stuck out. That fly was just like sitting there for like 2 minutes. So that was supposed to be a big Halloween costume this year. I don't know if that manifested, because I'm not going out in public. Didn't stop a lot of other people, though. And oh, yeah, just as a note to go back, Trump probably lied. He definitely lied about when he knew he was infected, and he almost definitely exposed Joe Biden to COVID at the first campaign. Sorry, not campaign, debate. And also didn't notify him about the exposure. He had to find out through the media. But anyway, and then the White House is still a COVID hotbed. Like currently, like as of a few days ago, 5 of Mike Pence's immediate staff, like I think including his chief of staff, I don't remember, but his inner circle all just tested positive with COVID. So that is still actively playing out. And when, of course, he goes out and he's telling everyone, oh, it's no big deal. COVID's no big deal. I got it. I'm fine. You'll be fine if you get it. Don't worry about it. And everyone who wears masks is an idiot. So he's just doubling down. All right. So now to get to the single biggest factor of what's going on in this country right now, which is the riots, protests, and demonstrations. Riot can be a very loaded term, especially because, well, the New York Times did a survey, which I think had not 96% of them were peaceful, but I am specific. Some of them point blank are riots. So that's why I'm including it in the spectrum of things that are happening. It's been amazing and heart-wrenching and inspiring and a huge emotional roller coaster. But I am not going to go super in depth into the specific deaths, because I mean, there are too many to count. But I will probably go in depth on this topic later. But essentially, on May 25th, George Floyd was murdered by Minneapolis police officers on video. And it took a long time. And it made people very upset, including me. And then there just, from that point on, every time the police killed someone who almost always is Black, riots and protests and demonstrations break out. Usually in the city where it happens will be where there's actual violence on the streets. Although Portland and Seattle have really kept it going this entire time, and in very, very small areas in the city, but they've been really hardcore. So is New York's been very hardcore about their protests too. So, and then the other biggest name in terms of someone who was unfortunately murdered by the police is Breonna Taylor, who was murdered by police during a botched raid that had nothing to do with her. They actually had the person in custody they were looking for when they killed her at her apartment. So those are, I don't know, I couldn't even tell you how many dozens of people have been killed during this time. And I mean, I honestly have to emotionally disconnect just to talk about it this much right now. But let me go back to my notes. So yeah, that started May 25th, and it has been going on every single day since May 25th. The very next day, May 26th, there was a small peaceful gathering outside the police station, and then the police responded with such extreme violence that people got really pissed off. That's how they were treating peaceful demonstrators. So the next night, a whole lot more people came, and they were not especially peaceful about it. So much has happened. It's hard to summarize, but it is something that is happening absolutely in every city. And I mean, even the small cities and just like even in rural areas. I mean, white people suddenly started figuring out that Black people were being oppressed, and or I don't know, that's an oversimplification, but it is a commonly used one, I guess. But yeah, a lot's been going on. I have been a water boy to other people's efforts, to the people who are doing the real heavy lifting. Nationally speaking, it's just like it's hard to even know where to begin. A lot of really heavy stuff has happened. It unfortunately has become a thing for people on the right to run their cars into protests. I think it's happened. Last number I heard was a couple of weeks ago, and I think it's happened 54 times so far. There have been a number of deaths. It's almost always people on the right killing people on the left. I think there's only been one time that I've heard of going the opposite direction. But there was a local case where, again, it's a little hard to talk about. But yeah, someone drove their car into some protesters here in Austin on Congress, and then they opened fire and killed someone. And at the moment, APD refuses to arrest him because he's claiming self-defense. And well, they really hate protesters, so that self-defense claim, despite all of the video evidence, is good enough for them. But I think what's going to happen is that the guy who's running for the new Travis County DA, who's almost definitely going to win, he's running on a reform ticket. He's almost definitely going to file charges against him, in which case it doesn't matter if APD wants to arrest him or not. They have to arrest him if the DA files charges. So hopefully we'll see justice there. But the one that's gotten the most attention is I believe, 17-year-old named Kyle Rittenhouse. Shot 3 people in Kenosha and killing 2 of them, and the third one lost his arm. And he was just a self-appointed vigilante with some other vigilante. There are all these militias running around right now, and it's very stressful. And that's what everyone's fear is post-election. Trump has been stoking all these far-right militia groups, and they all have they are armed to the teeth. They've got all these automatic and semi-automatic assault rifles. And anyway, this kid had his mom drive him across state lines so that he could go to Kenosha and stand guard outside some stores that didn't ask them to. And he got into some sort of dispute with the first person he shot, and then the other 2 people were trying to disarm him, so he had to shoot those 2 in self-defense. And that happened about 6 weeks ago at this point, maybe a little longer. I just saw he was in the news today. His bail was set at $2 million, which seems a little low. But I mean, just the fact that he even has bail, and maybe it's because he's a minor. I don't know. But meanwhile, a militia group came very close to executing a plan to kidnap the governor of Michigan, who the far right really hates in Michigan because a woman is telling them to shut down their businesses and wear a mask, and they don't like that. So they were going to kidnap her and put her on a mock trial and execute her. And that was thwarted. And then it turned out that they were entertaining doing the same thing to the governor of Virginia, although that was more of a down the road after their grand success was carried out in Michigan. And also, I mean, just 2 or 3 days ago, Biden's campaign bus, although I don't believe he was on it, but I believe Kamala Harris was and Wendy Davis, it got surrounded, like on I-35 here in Austin, it got surrounded by a Trump caravan, like Trump supporters with like these big trucks with Trump flags on them. They knew that the bus was coming from San Antonio. They all waited on the side of the road for it. Then they surrounded the bus and tried to run it off the road. And there's video footage of one of their pickup trucks repeatedly ramming into the side of an SUV that was in the convoy with the bus. And I mean, it could definitely be interpreted as attempted murder, especially if they had run the bus off the road. That could have been very serious. I mean, it wasn't like a flat area. If it had gone off the road, it would have turned over. So anyway, things are bad. There's a lot of heavily armed people, and the police always side with them, even though, I mean, it's just flagrantly illegal what they're doing, but they're pro-police, so the police want to support them. And that leads us, let's see, just got a few last things to touch on here. Oops, wrong button. Oh yeah, and just the last, oh right, right. So then right now there are major, and I use the word riot on purpose, there are serious riots going on in Philadelphia and have been for several days. The very first night, 33 cops were injured. A day or two later, it was up to 55. I don't know where they're at now, but obviously there was another unjustifiable police shooting, and people are very unhappy about it, and they are letting that be known. And oh yeah, God, one of the more noteworthy things, even for Trump and all of the stuff that comes out of his mouth nonstop, but during the first presidential debate with Biden, he was asked to denounce white supremacy. And instead, what he said was, "Proud Boys, stand down and stand by." And they are standing by with loaded guns and bated breath. I wouldn't even say they're totally standing by. They've been a little active, but it is true. They definitely scaled it way back. So he's also told people with guns to show up at polling places to make sure everything looks okay. It doesn't look okay. A bunch of guys with guns at polling places. So that is not legal. So it will almost definitely happen tomorrow. I mean, I don't think there's any way possible, with as much as he told people with guns to show up at polling places and make sure everything looks okay to them, there's no way there aren't going to be people who try to do that. People are around, and like law enforcement is prepared for this possibility, so hopefully it'll be handled okay. It also would be weird because we've broken like so many election records. Like, more people have voted early in this election than voted in the entire last election. So it would be a little weird to wait until election day to show up when voting's been going on for like 3 weeks already, but I'm sure they will. Let's see. I feel like, was there one more thing, or was that it? That's basically it. So yeah, it is very, very, very possible that I don't know. There's several possibilities. Obviously, like, Trump is not going to accept defeat. He's just that would be the biggest possible shocker, even though it looks like he's going to lose by a complete landslide. Even if that happens, it does not look like because it's rigged, and he's setting it all up. So if it's anything other than a victory for him, it's rigged. And he's already falsely stating that all the ballots have to be counted by the end of the day on Tuesday. So if they aren't, then it's rigged. And he's saying that, by the way, because for some ridiculous reason, a lot of places don't count the mail-in ballots until election day, even though they've had them this entire time. So, whereas the voting machines, they tabulate everything right there on the spot. So he knows that Democrats are more likely to vote by mail and Republicans are more likely to vote by machines on election day. So he is setting, the idea is the votes that are counted by the end of the day on Tuesday are going to be the people who showed up to vote on election day, which will be his people. I don't know. It's really not good. And it will be especially messy civil war if it comes to that. I don't think I think it probably won't be full tilt. I think there will be some violence. But the flip side of this is, can you imagine if Biden loses when he's 10% ahead in the polls? And he has been. He's been that far ahead for like 2 months or something. Can you imagine people's reactions that the system is that broken, that the guy who's that far ahead loses because of the Electoral College? I don't know what people on the left are going to do if they lose despite winning, because he's clearly going to win the popular vote. The only thing in question is the Electoral College. So, I think between Election Day and Swearing-in Day are going to be some very treacherous times. I did get some supplies. I think everything will be fine, but I worry about at the beginning of the pandemic when people just cleaned all the store shelves. I think it's really more of an issue of if people hoard. So for the record, I'm not hoarding. I just, every so often I buy a jumbo roll of toilet paper or, a package of toilet paper. So I went ahead and got that. I'm not getting multiple packages, but I just decided everything that I periodically re-up, I'm going to go ahead and re-up now and leave plenty for everyone else. So that's it. Good. I kept this to around a half hour. So yeah, hopefully in the fast I can make it a little more short and sweet. But tonight I just wanted to go ahead and try and recap. It's been a lot's happened in the last 200 or so days. So yeah, that's it. It was fun updating everyone and talking to everyone. And by all means, feel free to leave a comment. I'm very bad at self-promotion, but yeah, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. You know the drill. And I guess that's it. I will check back in with everyone in the next 2 or 3 days. Bye-bye.